supposed to enforce contract. After the Civil War and during the Depression, when there were gold coins and gold contracts, the government ruled that the contracts had no validity to them. They just threw them out. They said, oh no, you don't have to pay in gold, just pay in Federal Reserve notes. Let the Fed print money and we'll pay off our bills. So government got off the hook, as well as private individuals did not have to pay in gold. So the government was doing exactly the opposite of what they have to do. Our Constitution is not complex. What we need are a whole new generation. Grow up and look at this and say the Constitution is the rule of law. Society actually produced a society where I and others would have less material benefits, I would still argue for the free society. That's what's going to happen. But we never have to take that argument. We don't have to be defensive on that because we won't be poorer. We will be richer. But if you have a society that's very, very wealthy because we've had free markets and sound money, and we get directing ourselves only to the material benefits and using the government to redistribute these benefits and have a new system of economics, then the problem there is people forget about where the wealth comes from. They forget that they concentrate on the materialism and the redistribution. At the same time, what they forget about is what is freedom all about. And this is what I think this revolution is all about. What is freedom all about? And then let me tell you, from my viewpoint, freedom is still very popular. In the 1960s, we were suffering the consequences of the war going on and drugs and all kinds of social problems. But it was clearly divided between left and right. It was actually more confusing than it is now because I think we're dividing it differently. Freedom and totalitarianism. But in the 1960s, when they used to talk about that, I used to hear them say, they said, well, if you were 20 years old and you weren't a liberal, you didn't have a heart. Yeah. But if you were 40 and you didn't have, if you weren't a conservative, you didn't have a brain. So I would like to suggest to you, the freedom philosophy I'm talking about means we should have both a heart and a brain. Principles of liberty have been around for a long time. You go back to the Magna Carta, but just think, you know, the current administration is actually undermining the writ of habeas corpus and government assassinations, these kind of things. So we are canceling a lot of things that were developed over many, many centuries. But what about the real experiment? The real experiment in liberty has been in this country. It was the best experiment, the best Constitution, but there's only a remnant left. We know what it is. We can restore it. We can go back to it. It's a lot better than if we didn't have that history. So I believe that the transition backwards is better. But it isn't going backwards. You know, they claim that we are the past. People who are the past are the ones who believe in tyranny and big government and control our lives and control the economy. Sound money, improve upon it, was far from a perfect system, improve on economic understanding, which has happened with the study of Austrian economics. There's no reason in the world why we can't be the future and not the past as the other side. One of the most important things that we get out of freedom is, you know, our responsibility for ourselves.
That's right.
Freedom means you do make these choices for ourselves, but people are always hesitant. There's one group will say, well, that sounds good, but we can't trust people to spend their own money because they won't take care of themselves the way we think they should take care of themselves.
Some of their
going destroying the currency and bankrupting the country and taking away our liberties and accomplishing nothing.
There you go, that's much better.
So the group that believes that we have to have economic intervention has to accept the fact that people have a natural right to their liberties and their life and the fruits of their labor, and they ought to be able to spend the money as they darn well please.
Yeah! Woo!
You should have your liberty to do what you want. You know, whether we understand this pretty well when we talk about religious freedom.
Right.
The First Amendment protects that, and you should never be penalized for it. But it also protects those people who choose not to have religious beliefs. That should bring us together. It should bring us together. Who doesn't fit into that category? That includes all of us. But we should recognize why that
makes too much sense.
Is so important. The economic issue is a little bit more challenging because people are determined that there will be some that won't take care of themselves, and then the burden will be placed on their neighbor and the government. But that's where the flaw is. You shouldn't make this assumption that there's always the moral hazard that somebody else will take care of us if we don't take care of ourselves. If you're told that you have personal freedom on your own life, on your own lifestyles and your own habits, then you might do some harm. Well, this is true. In a society like this, where there's economic and personal liberty, you become, or it is necessary that we become more tolerant. People say, oh no, I can't tolerate, they're going to go out and gamble and do these things that I just disapprove of. But you know, tolerance, when they don't hurt other people, they only can hurt themselves, is quite a bit different than endorsing something. Because we have religious freedom, we don't endorse the religion that people practice. So why can people say, well, if we have personal liberties, we're endorsing what their bad habits might be? That isn't the case. Right now, what I witness is a restoration of a deep interest in what a free society is all about. And we have to do it rather quickly. And the reason why there's more attention now is the recognition that our foreign policy is failing, it's a failure, and the leadership in both parties at this very moment do not offer us many alternatives. When the Democrats are in, they think a Republican might say something different. When the Republicans are in, the Democrats say something else, and nothing ever changes. They claim that, like the administration changed, they would have a different attitude about the use of medical marijuana.
Yeah.
But it never seems to happen.
Yeah! Legalize it!
I think the medical marijuana issue is interesting because, once again, it can bring people together. Some people criticize libertarians and conservatives for defending the principle of the states making these determinations. The states should be able to make some of these determinations. But some are accused that if you say states' rights, then they paint you as a bad person.
Extremists.
Why would this be the case? If you live in a state where medical marijuana has been legalized, why don't you say under the Constitution that the federal government has no right to override the state?
Run a third party, Ron! Third party!
The drug issue is one area where I'm cautiously optimistic because our country did wake up on the insanity and the ill-advised prohibition of alcohol. And alcohol obviously is a very, very dangerous drug. So I think people will wake up, especially when they start looking at the problem. When you look at addiction as a crime rather than a disease, it might be a lot different. If we looked at it in this manner, I think there would be a much better acceptance than saying that we have to throw everybody in prison for these things.
Yeah, for 3 pounds of pot.
This is where I am cautiously optimistic that one day we're going to wake up, and it might be that the states will just, grab hold of nullification and say, look, we don't want you forward. We don't want you coming in here. But there's there's every reason to be optimistic that we can turn this around. Optimistic, one reason, because people are recognizing that we have a problem. We have a drug addiction, and we have an addiction to big government. So if we know we have the addiction, we know that we have to quit. This is what I think has happened in the last 4 or 5 years. I've been talking about this for a long time, and the reception is completely different. Since the financial crisis hit, and these prolonged wars have continued with no end in sight, and with the bankruptcy on our doorstep, the American people, especially the young people, are starting to realize, what am I getting into? I want a better deal.
You said it.
Yeah.
I see a big black hole with a booby trap in the center.
Third party. Third. I can't talk anymore. Third party. Third party, run.
Let me touch a little bit more on that agency of government that we call the Fed. This is something that I've been studying for a long time. And when the last link to gold was severed, I just sort of had a suspicion what would happen. Everything would explode on the side of spending and deficits and prices and financial bubbles and the crisis that we have. But the Fed is important because it facilitates big government. So we can describe what liberty is all about, and we can look for better people to go to Washington and hope they don't vote a certain way. But if you didn't have a Fed, it wouldn't be financed.
That's right.
Because members of Congress,
Exactly.
they kept responding and saying, well, I have to vote for this or I won't get reelected.
Yeah.
If they did that, they'd have to raise taxes if they didn't have the Fed. They'd have to keep borrowing. Interest rates would go up. As long as you have the Fed there, you delay the problem. You delay it, and you can allow this government to grow and grow. And that is what's happened. Almost every war fought throughout history has been fought with destruction of currencies. So in many ways, there's such a benefit with honesty and money. And the founders understood this, and they tried to save us from ourselves. But we didn't follow the rules. Matter of fact, they warned us brothers clearly about democracy. Don't drift into democracy, because democracy is very bad because rights become arbitrary. Their argument was that democracy would eventually waste our economy and waste our whole system. And it would be consuming, it wouldn't be building wealth. And it would continue by the dictatorship of the majority to the point where the whole thing collapses on itself. So we know what the problem is, we know what the solution is. We need to get more energized, we need to change the nature of government, we need to change the understanding of the people and the role of government, and we can reverse that. We can once again restore the greatness of America with freedom and prosperity.
Come on. Third party.